Hi Christopher, I am recording a feedback video for your problem solution draft, and as you can see I've got your paper pulled up on my computer, and the purpose of this feedback video is to address kind of the how larger issues in terms of how you are approaching the problem solution draft, and how you're approaching it, particularly in respect to the assignment criteria for this paper. So I won't be focusing on local things like editing or a lot of sentence level grammatical and punctuation things. So it's really up to you to kind of go through it with a keen eye, and reading out loud is a good way to do this, but making sure that it's nice and polished. So in terms of your APA, you've got your headers look good. One thing that you want to focus on is having uniform spacing, and this is done, and you should be able to see this once I do the uniform spacing. You want to open up the paragraph dialog box, and the before and after are at 0, and then your line spacing is at double. And then from there you'll see that now there's all uniform spacing between your paragraphs. There we go. Okay, so I looked briefly through your paper. You're focusing on ocean pollution, and then so what I'm looking for in this paper, right, is some of the basic most important criteria for this assignment is that you identify a problem, you provide evidence of the problem, you provide discussions of and evidence that corroborates your discussion of potential solutions to the problem, and then you have a final paragraph that's a call to action, which is your assertion of the best solution to the problem. So you chose the problem of ocean pollution. So when looking at your introduction, one thing that you're missing is a thesis statement. So what I would recommend doing is probably joining these two paragraphs together to create one paragraph, but then a little bit of work is needed throughout here to make sure that everything is flowing together. So and then you have with the oceans covering 70% of our, I would just say 70% of the planet, when we can eliminate first person, you want to, and providing a great number of benefits for all living creatures, the human race is choosing to do very little about pollution that is destroying them. So my initial reaction to this is it just begs a question, because and I'm not reading this from a personal perspective, I'm reading this, I'm always reading as an objective reader, but it's right there. People have done some things, but I think it's really a matter of interpretation, whether we consider those things like it's not enough, it's too little, it's too much, it's like that type of thing, right? So what I would do here is I would hedge just a little bit, and I would change the past tense, or excuse me, the verb tense here. So I would say something like, the human race arguably has chosen to do very little about, and I would re-emphasize, right, the ocean pollution, and I would say destroying something along those lines, which is a little bit more specific, and has a little bit more concision and clarity to it. So people tend to not pay attention to problems they don't see during their day-to-day life. So ocean pollution is increasing at an alarming rate. According to Bradford, right, then you bring in some evidence. You don't need that period there. And then there are a lot of different ways to pollute the environment, such as, and then you don't need this colon here, such as, and you give some examples. Each of these has a severe impact on the environment and the species that live there. And then you have another quotation here. This quotation I would recommend cutting a little bit back. There's a few things you may not need from it, because it has, while some is dumped directly in the seas, you can say, you can start the quotation here, an estimated 80% of marine litter makes its way to the oceans gradually from land-based sources, and then, right, you don't need any of that. There we go. And then you don't need this period. You only need the period that's inside the quotation marks. But we would want a comma because you are connecting this here. It looks like you have an extra space there. So, I think some important information that's missing from your introduction that is needed is, what is the scope of ocean pollution look like? So, like, you have this quotation here, which is really more of a definition of what pollution is, but I don't think we need a definition of pollution for this paper. We want more of a specific definition that, or even description of what, like, ocean pollution looks like. So how much of the ocean is considered to be polluted? How many, has ocean pollution, destroyed any ecosystems, or is it in the process of destroying ecosystems? Like, what does the percentage of that look like? Is it like coral reefs, or are any animals that live in the ocean at risk of endangerment because of ocean pollution, right? That's what we want more of in the introduction, rather than just a definition of pollution. We want more of a specific description of what constitutes ocean pollution, and what really, like, why ocean pollution, not just why ocean pollution is a problem, like, we know it's a problem, but what it currently looks like. And there are people who have tried to put together, like, the numbers of how much pollution is in the oceans, and then so bringing in evidence like that would be much more beneficial to your introduction, and it is needed. And then you don't yet have a thesis statement, so your thesis statement needs just essentially to say that ocean pollution is something that needs a solution because blankety blank, right? And so that's essentially is what the thesis for this paper looks like. Your next your first body paragraph, it talks about it's not a cohesive paragraph because there's no, like, one main idea in it. You start with this idea that, okay, ocean pollution greatly impacts every species on the planet, and you need an and there, otherwise it's a comma splice, and the ocean is responsible for producing over half of the oxygen, blah, 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 blah. So, and then essentially there's three sentences in this paragraph, and then you have a lot of the garbage that ends up in the ocean is plastic, so it is not biodegradable. These items will get caught in marine life or be mistaken for food. This will eventually kill them. So here you're doing a little bit of what I was just recommending to do, but it's still not specific enough. You basically spent this amount of time telling us what the ocean does in terms of balancing the ecosystems of the earth, and then here you talk about garbage ends up in the ocean and it can kill animals. Like, so you have these, like, two ideas that are connected in some way, but not really, and you're not doing the work in order to connect them. But in terms of, like, what this paragraph is doing as a paragraph, it's not, like, there's no foreseeable purpose to it. So what you really want to focus on is, and same thing in the next paragraph, is you continue to talk about other types of pollutions, right? So oil spills, the noise pollution, what that looks like. Your citation dumping at the end, which you don't want to do, like you need to put a citation after every sentence that has information that is not you talking. So like you might need a citation here, probably need a citation here, probably need a citation here, right? But this again, just like this paragraph, is really just more about like these things are part of ocean pollution that is problematic. So if anything, I might join these two sentences or two paragraphs to just have one paragraph that provides some additional information about ocean, like what causes ocean pollution. Obviously, you're not covering everything because I don't think you can. There's not enough room. I don't think you need any of this. I would just go straight to like what's causing the ocean pollution. So, you might have, in that case, you need a topic sentence to let the reader know what the purpose of this paragraph is, right? Ocean pollution is caused by right? And right, those are the three things that you talk about: garbage, oil spills, and noise pollution. But again, you need to, if you're going to have a paragraph about this, then you can't citation dump at the end. You have to have evidence scattered throughout. So integrating evidence is something you want to work on. And then you go into the potential solutions. So you say a few simple changes in a person's lifestyle can help protect, the oceans from becoming polluted. Some of the changes, an individual, right? You don't want second person, would be to stop pouring grease, fats, and oils down the drain. Do not pour any types of chemicals that are not environmentally safe. Do not flush trash down the toilet. Dispose of all trash properly and reduce the use of chemicals on your lawn. So it's a kind of a haphazard paragraph, and then after that you go into what you would consider the best solution to be. Your paper needs to have more information about potential solutions. So I would break this out into two paragraphs. So, right, I would have one paragraph that's about, one potential solution for mitigating ocean pollution is for people to be more educated about and aware of what they should be putting down sinks and flushing down toilets, right? Something like that. Includes I don't think you say chemicals. Medication is a big one that people, I think, forget about, but I would probably add medication to that. So I would have one paragraph that talks about that, and then you need to bring in evidence. Again, your citation dumping. So that's not an effective way of integrating evidence, and so unless you're effectively integrating your evidence, you're really essentially just summarizing or paraphrasing something that another source is talking about, and you're not integrating it with your own voice, and the reader, it doesn't make for effective writing. So one paragraph on that, and then from here in my own voice, I would say, like, how have governments tried to educate people on what they should and should not be putting down sinks and what they should and should not flush down toilets, right? And so I would talk a little bit about that, which means I would have to do a little bit of research on that, and then I would talk about like what that looks like. So it just, because all you're basically saying is like, don't do these things, but what are the ramifications of doing those things? So we need evidence of how sinks and toilets make their ways to the, like what we put in them and flush and put down a sink problematizes ocean pollution. Excuse me. And then I would have excuse me, I got the hiccups in the last video. I just did. I don't know why I'm having so many hiccups today. Excuse me. And then I would have a second paragraph. Okay. So, right, and then, can't spell additionally correct. Oh my goodness. I don't even need additionally. You can just say another potential solution includes selecting maybe gentle lawn, you know, well, it's really two other potential solutions, right? So trying to think of the best way to put this. Right, so that would be the topic sentence for this next paragraph, where you would be talking about these additional two potential solutions, which is lawn chemicals and garbage. And then in here, you would want to talk about that more and then bring in evidence to, you know, talk about like what chemicals do governments recommend or cities recommend because they're more environmentally friendly, and same thing with garbage. What have some of those solutions look like? Because the garbage thing has been going on for so long in terms of like recycling. I mean, I can remember back 20 plus years that it's been more and more mandated. And then when you go into your, I would just call it the best solution. And again, here I would hedge that arguably would make, again, we want to change your verbiage, the biggest difference in mitigating ocean pollution would be that is a medical helicopter. Sorry, Los Angeles has many helicopters properly disposing of trash. So, and then you give a quotation. It's just going to check the word count on that. I think you're okay. Yeah, it's not 40. So, all right. You have a tick mark there. So tick marks drive me crazy. So essentially, let me finish looking at you don't need a separate conclusion. Your conclusion is your call to action. So I I would delete this and use the space to work on adding more meaningful information, such as what I've kind of talked about already. And you say, this is a very easy fix. People just need to be responsible with their waste, recycle when possible. It's not an easy fix, and that's because one of the criticisms of recycling and garbage disposal is that it's even when people do take the time to recycle, there are faults at the recycling companies that don't, like, it essentially things don't get recycled. So it's not that people aren't doing it. So I think you're reducing it. You're being very reductive about the solution to be like, hey, it's super easy. Like, if it was super easy, then recycling, we would have seen more benefits from recycling like a long time ago. So, but there's been a lot of criticism on cities on recycling, and especially those cities that enforce it and those cities that don't. So, like, I live in a city that enforces it. I've also lived in cities where they could care less what you do with your garbage. So what I think needs to be in this is more about if this is going to be your best solution, because you're talking about multiple solutions for your best solution, but you really only want one. The recycle one, I honestly, it would be easier to focus on this other one, the one you have down here with plastic, just because it's easier to talk about that because it's more specific. When you just say like just trash disposal, like that's a huge conversation that is so specific state by state and city by city that it's almost impossible to talk about. But if you're talking about state and federal legislation that has to do with plastic, it's a much more accessible type of solution. And so, for example, I live in Los Angeles, where plastic bags are not allowed, and legislation was just passed to ban straws as well, plastic straws. So, like, I live in a city that regularly passes legislation to get rid of plastic things. So what you might say is that, like, for example, one of the best solutions would be for, and I don't think California is the only state that does that, but I think we're the first for straws, I think. But you might say something like, there needs to, federal legislation needs to pass, legislation about plastic has been passed in these states, and then, does that legislation, or has that legislation helped, in terms of banning plastic bags and things like that. So, and there's got to be numbers on the plastic bags. That legislation's much older. The straw legislation just went through this year. So, but looking at, like, does that indeed help mitigate ocean pollution? And for example, then what would be the call to action? The call to action would be that maybe there needs to be federal legislation that bans plastic, like plastic bags, plastic straws, plastic whatever else. There are other things, right? So the call to action needs a lot of work in terms of specificity, and it actually being a call to action rather than just being like, hey, it's really easy, people should dispose of trash properly. Like, that's not a call to action. And there's a lot of criticism and contention involved with that particular solution. So it does need some work. And then, like I said, I would just eliminate this and use the space for other things that need to be in your paper. The conclusion does not need to be there. In terms of your references page, just make sure it starts on a new page. I probably did that. Your font is not in black, so make sure that you just select all and then put it all in black. That's easy enough to do. And just so you know, when you have things that start with an article is a, an, or the, you alphabetize it by the second word. So you would alphabetize that by F and not A. So other than that, those are all my large scale notes. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, good luck with the revision.